Today we have an exciting session planned for our developers who are looking to stay on top of their costs and try to optimize costs in the cloud. And I'd love to share all these details with you, so let's get started. My name is Gobind Johar. I'm a group product manager at Google Cloud. With me, I have Fahd from Google and Frank Dice from Major League Baseball. You'll be hearing from them shortly during the presentation. Cloud cost optimization is complicated, and this complexity can have a real impact on your business. 1 in 2 engineering leaders tell that their disconnect between the finance and engineering orgs can have a meaningful impact on wasted cloud spend. And the industry's answer to this complexity, to taming this complexity, is to shift the cost optimization effort left to the enterprise developer. The reason for that is that the stem of the complexity is the sheer scale and volume and heterogeneity of cloud resources. And who better to know that than the enterprise developer themselves? Today, we'll talk about tips and tricks for Google Cloud developers to start optimizing costs on your own proactively. Let's take a look. To help our developers understand their costs and be more empowered, Google Cloud is taking a full stack approach. First, we're investing heavily in our granular cost data. With granular costs, this gives you the power to understand costs in so much detail that you can root cause it very, very quickly. And we're excited to announce 5 additional products today for coverage. Second, we're democratizing this data through a public API we're launching for the very first time to generate cost efficiency reports for your applications. And third, we're using all this powerful data to build a sidekick agent that now gives you the ability to reason about your costs deeply and proactively alert you about cost anomalies. Introducing new granular costs. Last year, when we were at Next, we announced Cloud Hub Optimize. This was the portal for developers to come see an executive summary of their costs and what's expensive and what's underutilized. So it answers those questions readily for you so that you don't have to spend time fidgeting with the data. And it also gives you a quick sense of what has changed over the last week. We're excited to announce 5 additional products to this Cloud Hub Optimized dashboard today. BigQuery, data transfer, load balancing, interconnect, and managed Apache Spark, previously known as Dataproc. Let's start with networking. If you've been in the developer shoes where the finance team has come and asked you, hey, why is the egress cost so high? What resources are using it? And you've just been like, I don't know. This is going to be your best friend. Cloud Hub Optimized is now going to have a top talkers card. In the top talkers card, you can see immediately the top 5 resources that are using the most egress dollars in your project or your application. We also break out that cost by the type of egress. So if you wanted to make sure that your VM was actually transiting over standard internet, but you saw it doing premium internet, this would be the place to come check that. In addition, the best part about this is that we're able to virtually explain all your egress costs on day 1 out of the box, meaning that you don't have to opt in anything. This just works out of the box for you. The other big component of data transfer and data processing costs is load balancing and interconnect. We've got you covered there too on Cloud Hub Optimize. With data transfer on load balancing, there's 2 ways to break it, at the L4 layer and then the L7 layer. The L4 layer, we will be able to break out the data transfer costs at the forwarding rule level, and at the L7 layer, we'll be able to do it at the URL maps. So imagine if you're a platform admin and you're using a shared VPC to host centralized load balancing services to multiple applications. All you have to know is which forwarding rule or which URL map they're using, and you can immediately tell how much that cost you in data transfer and data processing. Similarly, we're able to break out costs by your interconnect data transfer back to the individual VLAN attachments in your project. This is super powerful because that link is expensive. So you really want to know who's using all that data transfer on the VLAN attachments, and then trace it back to the resource that initiated it. Managed Apache Spark. If you've used Dataproc, then you know that it can be pretty painful for you to be able to collect all the costs across Dataproc because it can span multiple product SKUs. We're taking that pain away with Cloud Optimize, and now giving you a seamless way to see your granular costs at the Dataproc cluster, session, and batch level. We automatically include any of the GCE VMs that are created under the hood by Dataproc so that you can see all your costs in one place right out of the box. BigQuery. Quick question, how many of you are BigQuery users? Yeah, that's kind of what I expected. Every one of you who raised their hands knows how painful this is, right? It is extremely excruciating to figure out how your costs are attributed, especially if you're using BigQuery edition slots. I am delighted to inform that we have figured out a way to break out your BigQuery costs from your admin projects to your consumption projects, including if you're using slots, right down to the job and dataset level. That means you no longer have to rely on custom homegrown approximations to apportion admin project BigQuery costs to individual consumption project BigQuery costs. So you, as a developer or a platform admin, can go to Cloud Optimize and ask, how much did this project cost me in BigQuery? Or even figure out what are the top 5 most expensive BigQuery jobs that are costing you the most. Frank, at this point, I'd like to invite you up on stage, and he'll take us through how Major League Baseball is taking all these granular costs and leveraging them to accelerate their cost management. Frank?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gobind. I am Frank Dice, the Director of Edge Engineering at Major League Baseball, and I oversee the MLB Edge program as well as the FinOps team. I have 3 stories and 2 live demos today, and as we all know, we'll see how that goes. So, first story, as far as my FinOps responsibilities, I oversee the cost optimization opportunities at MLB. I was going to do an audience interactive portion here, but Gobind took away my BigQuery thunder, so I'm just going to move on. My first story starts off about 2 years ago. We had a minor incident opened about a scheduled report. It started going slow. All right, let's investigate, easy enough. After that investigation, we come to find out that that workload was going slower, and eventually stopped. And as all of you know, how we debug BigQuery, we go in the information schema of the project, we investigate, we can look at the admin project and see what's going on there. But what it comes down to is, how do you put all of that together? We do BigQuery reservations across the whole org, just as a point of context. And what we did is we come to find out that the workload itself for our reporting job was using idle capacity. And those who've used BigQuery may know how idle capacity works. If new jobs come online and want that capacity, it gets cut in half and then fairly shared until you have such a small subset that the big reporting job doesn't run. And that's a problem. So after many days of working with the data engineering team and figuring out what we were trying to do, we finally got a grasp on what everything looked like. And I just want to share right now of an example of a BigQuery cost analysis query. This one is just for on-demand usage. And here's a few more. Now you can see how long the jobs are running, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of Google Sheets, and then BigQuery to report on BigQuery using BigQuery. Yes. And fun fact, these queries are per project. So working with several hundred different projects means several hundred different queries. We did eventually get it under control, but the workflow that we put in place was brittle. And at this point, we're starting to get into that Abbott and Costello skit. Who's on first? What's on second? See what I did there? I snuck in a baseball joke. And then comes Cloud Hub Optimize, specifically the BigQuery functionality. Gobind, I apologize for stealing your slide. I don't have a demo for this one, but I've got to preview it. And this right here replaces so much of the manual work that we've had to do in the past. And I am truly excited because one of our largest enterprise reservations on BigQuery is coming due in the next 6 to 9 months. And I will be using this and sharing it with my team. And I do want to point out that this supports BigQuery additions day one, right out of the box. Now let me step back from my second topic. Cost analysis and cost visibility is at the heart of what MLB FinOps does. We support 39 different business units internally across several thousand applications. App Optimize, specifically with these new features, is something that I can put in front of a development team and they can immediately understand. They can dive in as needed. No more custom dashboards. No more ongoing care and feeding of a third-party tool. That single consistent entry point that can be shared across the organization. And for those in the room who have done cost analysis at scale, this is a huge win. Now let's dive into my first demo. And we'll switch to the screen, please. Thank you very much. So alongside FinOps, I also lead the MLB Edge team. And we are responsible for a centralized ingress platform for all of our fan-facing products. And what that specifically means for this conversation is I now have a budget, which is a small change, but it's meaningful. Running the FinOps program, that spotlight used to be put on those individual business units, and then having it turn back on yourself, it's a practice what you preach moment. So, switching over to the first live demo, this is a project that I own in a non-production environment. We've been doing upgrades and performance testing over the past week, and let's dive in and just take a look and see what's happening here. So we've got total cost. This is mostly stock standard. It was released last year. We're able to see total cost over time, cost and utilization and usage. And for context in the audience, these two right here, these spikes were due to some performance testing that we did during those 2 days. And something new that's coming in, as Gobind showed, is this top talkers section. Now you can see exactly what the cost is, what the cost changed by, and the view button, you can see where it went. This used to take pulling metrics, pulling billing data, stitching it together with a little bit of hope and prayer to be able to get this level of detail and this level of data. And I clicked a button and it's right here. Now let's dive into Cost Explorer itself. So we're stretched out over 14 days here, generally the same screen, cost changes, the total cost by GCP resources. Awesome, that looks good on the screen. We can sort by network cost, compute engine, cloud load balancers, and anything else that might have that network cost is right there. You can sort by it, you can analyze it, et cetera, et cetera. And then resource lists. Down here, this is what breaks out the actual instances themselves. With the network cost, you have all of that information right there, with total cost, with the vCPU used, and these are low. It's a test environment. We only use it every so often, and there is definitely some room for optimization, which is something else this shows. But I'm not going to cover that here. So, after everything I just said, with the little bit of context I was able to put in, do you understand it? And that right there, thinking, resonating, is that something that you can put in front of a development team for them to be able to understand, to see their costs? And I think this is huge. Yes. And my last demo, I want to provide a little context here first. I was on stage with Gobind last year, And I may have made him promise that he'd deliver me an API. And he did. And it's fantastic. So the MLB Edge program is still young, and I spend a lot of time in the terminal investigating, troubleshooting, and debugging. So I did what anybody else would do, is I wrote a Python script to be able to use the API to get costs in my terminal. And with this, we've got 3 reports that I put together. The first one is top 15 resources by cost, top 15 compute instances by CPU, and my favorite, the cost delta over the last 14 days. Let's run these and take a look. So with the generation here, we can see the individual resources, the individual costs, and where they're coming from, right here. The second report, compute instances by CPU. We can see average CPU, average memory, as well as cost. And the 2 items there are because we have a misconfigured agent on the VMs themselves, and that has a JIRA ticket that needs to be addressed. I found that out due to this. And then the last one is the cost delta by resources. Now we can see what week 1 is, what week 2 is, and what are those big delta changes. And we can see cloud logging has come down, cloud monitoring has gone up, and at the end of the day, it's that quick to be able to look at your costs from that development persona and being able to put it easily in front of your development teams. So that's how I've been using the API today. Fun fact, it took me longer to get the MLB logo in the terminal than it did to do the entire API integration by an order of magnitude. And that wraps it up for my live demos. Thank you very much for your time. And one last thing, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but with the API being released, it brings some additional benefits and quality of life improvements that I hadn't thought of last year. And my final fun fact before I turn it back over to Gobind, developers typically work out of IDEs, like VS Code. VS Code has integration for AI agents. AI agents can connect to MCP servers. And on that note, back to you, Gobind.
Thank you, Frank. Wow, what a start to the day. Live demo from a customer. Do you need any more validation that this stuff works, right? This is awesome. Thank you for that really cool demo. We really enjoyed the sort of full breadth that Major League Baseball is already taking advantage of for the granular costs and how it's helping you accelerate your cost management and optimization journeys. And you're exactly right, Frank. We have oh, got my slide, yep. You're exactly right. As enterprises adopt more agentic AI workflows, APIs will play a crucial role in that transition, which is why we're excited to share that we're launching an App Optimize API, a brand new API for developers and platform admins to generate cost efficiency reports for their projects and their applications. So this is focused entirely at the project scope or the application scope, so you don't actually have to worry about all the other details that are happening in your organization. You can focus on the things that you're most interested in. With this API, you get a couple of features out of the box, including things like coverage for up to 90 days of data, depending on product coverage. You can also query your costs and your utilization for vCPU and memory, along with your resource types. You can gather all this data and group it by hour, day, or month for further granular analysis if you wanted to see costs in more detail. And you can use cell filters to reduce the amount of noise and just focus on the resources that you're most interested in. The best part about this API is that it already takes all of the granular costs that we talked about earlier in the presentation into account, and it's built on top of that. So you get all that power in this API right out of the box. So if you're a developer who's ever wondered how much that GKE cluster that you built with A100 GPUs or the B100 GPUs has cost you over the last 1 week, Well, all you have to do now is spin up the terminal and call on the App Optimize API through a Python script or a curl, and you have the answer in seconds. But why are we talking about APIs in the age of agentic AI? That's what Frank was alluding to earlier. When we see AI using all this data, there's a chance that it might hallucinate. We all understand that. But we don't really want it to get creative when it's dealing with sensitive data like cost and utilization. With APIs, we're able to enforce structure to this information. And that means that when this information is actually passed into the agent, it already possesses semantic structure. That is, the data makes sense before the AI gets its hands on it. And since we've been in the business of building APIs for so long, and we can build them scalably and reliably and securely, this property is extremely valuable in the world of AI agents, because as they amplify their usage of APIs, we can do that performantly, and we can have audit trails. And we wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment that APIs are the need of the AI hour. And we see this trend playing out already in the industry. Gartner confirms in their report that as enterprises adopt more and more agentic AI applications, that'll lead to widespread adoption of API and API usage, not less. This is really important because it amplifies the utility of the App Optimize API, because now you can use it in your agentic workflows. And to show you this in action, I'd like to now call upon Fahd to stage, who's going to show you how he's using the App Optimize API and an agentic application to answer cost efficiency questions in natural language. Fahd?
Thank you, Gobind. Demo time. App Optimize. When I heard about it, I was like, I'm curious. Let's see how this thing plays out. When I started playing around with it, I was surprised. When I saw Frank and what Frank was doing with it, I was like, wait a second. Can we make this thing more agentic? And that's where I started playing around with it even more. If we can switch back to the computer, please. So the thing I did is not too difficult. I created an agent. Can we switch a stream, please? I created an agent, of course, in our symbol colors, symbol brand. And I have some applications. These applications are running, and I would like just to know what they're doing. So the App Optimize API, when you invoke it, it just spits out JSON. And who likes to read JSON? No one. Jason, maybe. So I created an agent, and this agent is like any other agent. It can respond. It can say things to you. We can say hello, and we can make jokes. We can ask it things. We can say knock, knock. It's me, the developer. The one that needs to know more about my costs. I mean, it's that simple. So what I've done, I have two applications. I have access to two applications, and they're in different projects, but they're my applications. So this agent understands that, and it says, are you asking about the symbol autoclaims app or the building permit app? So without bothering you too much with my typing, I'll just press my magical button here and ask you the question. And in the meantime, I'll go to the slides because I want to show you what I actually built. It's that simple. We have a developer, aka me. I'm not a developer, actually. I'm an infrastructure engineer, an app mod engineer, but yes, I am also a developer in the era of AI. I built a cost buddy on Cloud Run. I have an MCP server with a Python script that actually takes the App Optimize API and wraps it in, and I have an agent. Frank was saying something about how fast he built something, how much time he spent on the logo. I spent quite some time on this because it was new to me, because I was learning. But in the meantime, I built something that actually works, and I was thinking about, wow, this is so easy. And going back to my cost optimization agent, it spits out facts. So basically it tells me you have some virtual machines, and the cost went up the last 24 hours because I ran Locust. And that does something with cost. It's that simple. It's easy. We know the API works because it spits out a JSON file. The thing that I wanted to showcase is I want to make it more agentic for others to use. But then I started to think about who can use this in an organization. Me as a developer, I can use a chatbot. I can integrate it in Slack. I could integrate in Google Chat or any other app. Because it's relatively simple. API calls to an agent, API call to the API, or to the MCP server, you're done. But how many of us get these questions in your organization? Like, oh yeah, what's happening with cost? Can you look into that? And the example that Frank mentioned as well, it takes so much time to figure out what is happening and what costs you're incurring and where they come from. Shouldn't we think about exposing this to more people? So I had this idea. So this is the developer persona. Me as a developer, I would like to know how much cost I have. I ask it, it spits it out. But what if we could look at another perspective? We could switch back to the main slides, please. If we look at another perspective, this example. Same storyline, same tools, same MCP server. The only thing I added to it is a Google Doc. And I've instructed the agent to update the Google Doc in a specific way. So I was thinking about the product owner persona. I'm a product owner. I own multiple applications in multiple projects again, and yet I would like to know the information. This is the end result. I have a stand-up doc. We have a laser here. That has highlights and accomplishments and all kinds of things I'm doing or we're doing as a team, SRE updates, but also cloud spend utilization. So the agent understands if you ask it, if you tell it, I have a budget, I need to track against this budget this month. It basically deducts the daily cost against it. It tells you the cost per application, it tells you the breakdown, it tells you the utilization, and you can expand it as much as you want. Again, this is a demo, so it's relatively simply done, but you can expand it in any direction. So this is persona number 2 I was thinking of. And then again, think about your own organization. What kind of personas are out there? Who needs information? Managers. Who gives managers information? Everybody needs to give managers information. But also financial departments. You can think about all kinds of personas that you could expose an API to, give them an API, give them a chatbot, give them an interface, give them a document, give them a report, and just relieve the stress and the burden from us, the engineers, the developers, on finding this information, clicking through all these portals, and make your life easier. So the only thing I wanted to say is like managers, SRE engineers, developers, they all should say we love App Optimize because it's easy. If you want to copy what I did, I made a small repo so you can just take it and give me feedback that I'm a horrible developer, because I am. I'm not a developer. But try it yourself. Reach out, ask me questions, happy to help. And you'll see how simple it is. Actually, I'm ashamed to say how simple it is, but it is very simple. So it's there for you to use. Without further ado, I want to thank you for this moment, and I'll give the mic back to Gobind. There you go.
Thank you very much, Fahd. I really appreciate it. Super practical and super insightful for our developers who are, again, trying to stay one step ahead on their costs and trying to be ahead of the finance team, really, to be proactive about what they're seeing in terms of their costs. So this demo really gave us a little bit of a window into how you can be so flexible in integrating with the App Optimize API. In fact, we took the same idea and we augmented Gemini Cloud Assist, our sidekick agent for the cloud, to be able to deeply reason about your cloud costs. Let's see how that works. Gemini Cloud Assist is your companion in the cloud. It is your team's agent to help you do things like accelerating your app development. You can do design, development, deployment, as well as investigations. What this helps you do is, because it's powered by the latest generation of Gemini models and it can access your cloud data, it gives you the ability to accelerate your day-to-day workflows. So for example, if you wanted to create a 3-tier web app, for instance, you could ask Gemini Cloud Assist to help you design that. You could also ask it to launch an investigation, and it starts to debug an active problem that you might be seeing in prod, for instance. Today, we're thrilled to announce 2 new capabilities to Gemini Cloud Assist: cost optimization and proactive agents. Let's take a closer look. We all have an abundance of business analytics tools at our disposal these days. And yet, we hear many of our enterprises tell us that it takes days, if not weeks, for them to be able to debug cost spikes. Why is that? The volume and the quality of the data is a fundamental roadblock. Someone in your team has to comb through thousands of resources in the cloud and their cost and utilization data to figure out where that needle in the haystack is. And what makes matters worse is that you may actually have to use multiple tools and products to be able to analyze the data from those resources, which can cost even more time and effort. Furthermore, the usual disconnect of organizational complexity of sharing information between finance and engineering can slow this down to a halt. And let's not forget that while you're figuring all this out, the meters are still running, which means that the longer it takes for you to figure out where the problem is, the more expensive the problem is going to be. Enter Cloud Assist with cost optimization. With Gemini Cloud Assist, you can now shorten this lengthy ordeal-like analysis down to just a few minutes. This not only gives you the insights you're looking for quickly so that you can stop the bleeding, but it also frees up your valuable time to focus on feature development. And to avoid hallucination, we've grounded Gemini Cloud Assist on all the granular cost data that we talked about earlier in the presentation. And not only that, we have trained Gemini Cloud Assist to be able to converse about your cost data in terms that you would understand: SKUs, resources, products, projects, applications. So now it can not only pinpoint all the significant cost events that are happening in your timeline, it can also explain why that is happening. And it even goes a step further. It correlates all of your cost data with your auditing and monitoring data. So it can pinpoint exactly which infrastructure change led to the cost change, and including who might have created that resource. To give you a sense of the reasoning types that Gemini can perform for you now, let's take a quick example. You can ask about costs at the project or the application level and ask things like, hey, Gemini, how much did my application cost me over the last week? That was something that Fahd showed earlier. Then you can take it a step up and ask it about cost changes and say, hey, Gemini, what has changed the most in the last 5 days or in this last month? And it'll spit out all the resources that you're looking for. And also, you can go really meta if you wanted to with Gemini Cloud Assist and ask it, why did my cost change? Or you can even say, why am I here? Well, I don't know why it would be able to answer that, why am I here? But it can certainly tell you why your costs have gone up. So let's see how this is all going to work. What if you didn't even have to ask about this in your workflows? What if Gemini Cloud Assist could be a step ahead and give you all this information proactively without you even having to ask? What if, before you've even grabbed your morning coffee, Gemini Cloud Assist has run in the background, analyzed your cost data, applied its deep reasoning engine capabilities, and figured out the root cause of your cost spike, and now the results are ready for you proactively? Gemini Cloud Assist proactive agents can do just that. And I'd like to show you how all this works in a demo. Can we switch to the demo, please? All right. Excellent. So we're all familiar with Cloud Optimize at this point, and I have a project here that I'm signed into. And I'm looking at the cost for the last 30 days. Right? So what I wanted to do is, because this is an application that me and my colleague at Google developed, I don't really know what's going on with the cost. So I came to Cloud Optimize just to get some sort of a orientation as to, OK, what is really happening with my costs? So very quickly, I see an executive summary at the top from Gemini that gives me a quick orientation about what should I be focusing on. So it tells me that my average daily cost was about $180 for the last 30 days. However, there seems to be some sort of a jump that happened. Yep, I can see that there was a jump, and it's already trying to give me some more helpful information about the April 18th event. It's also telling me some primary drivers, that my cost is primarily dominated by Cloud SQL, by Cloud Run, as well as the Vertex Gemini API. So it gives me all that information right on the tips. This is awesome. What's really important is that with this executive summary, I know what question I want to ask next. So let's ask a follow-up question, because what I would really like to understand is, why are these costs ebbing and flowing? Why is this sort of pattern showing up and the costs are fluctuating over the last 30 days? So I'm going to pull Gemini up, and I'm going to press enter. And the question I'm going to ask is, can you please explain why my daily costs are fluctuating so much over the last 30 days? So while Gemini works, I want to actually walk you through a story about what happened this weekend with me. Like any good presenter, I was rehearsing my spiel over the weekend, and I thought it would be a good idea to do a dry run of my demo. And certainly nobody wants to touch their demo project the weekend before the big day, right? So I was like, yep, nobody's touching this. This is great. I'm going to go press refresh. And to my surprise, or shock, I saw these giant bars in my cost, which you can see here. And this was this past weekend. So up until now, everything was working according to plan. I was seeing the ebbing and flowing. I understood what was happening. And then suddenly, I see these giant vertical bars in my cost. And the first thing was like, what happened? So I called my buddy in a panic, and I asked, hey, did you make a change to this project? And he's like, no. And I was like, something changed, and you and I are the only ones who have edit access to this project, so it has to be one of us, and it wasn't me. So he's like, no, I didn't make any changes. So I was like, are you absolutely sure? He's like, yeah. I was like, all right, fine. So at this point, I did exactly what you think I was going to do, and I asked Gemini. So I asked Gemini Cloud Assist, and I was like, Gemini, what happened on April 18th? And it actually produced a really clear and articulate reasoning of what happened. And hopefully the answer will come back in just a second here. But when I looked at the summary, I sent a screenshot of that to my buddy, and I showed it to him. He's like, oh, I know what happened. I was like, OK, what happened? He's like, yeah, it was me. I was like, OK. And I was like, so what did you do? And he's like, oh, for the demo, we had to get some provision throughput capacity from the Gemini team, and their way of implementing it is to actually charge you in your project. That's why you're seeing these vertical bars in the cost. And I was like, great. This is not going to interfere with my demo at all. Fantastic. All right, well, right on time, Gemini actually produced a summary here. So let's quickly look at what Gemini told us, right? So it said, daily costs in the project are fluctuating primarily due to Vertex AI usage and the provisioning costs. Most significant spike occurred on April 18th. Great, because of the Vertex AI provision throughput. And this is my buddy's LDAP right here. Because he couldn't argue with this. Like, how could you, right? And I was like, yep, it's here. It's a plain text now. There's nowhere to hide. And it actually gives me a sense of all the other costs. So let's take a look at the full analysis here for a sec. So I want to call out a few things here. Gemini has produced a full list of steps it took. It's a clear, articulate representation of all the things it did for you so that you understand that it didn't go off by the wayside and did something that it wasn't supposed to. Second, it figured out on the fly what analysis to run. This is really important. This is where the power of the Gemini tool comes in. This is what we did with Cloud Assist. It figured out what analysis to run to compare your costs, wrote some code on the fly, and analyzed it for you on the fly. And in this particular case, it identified that your costs are grouped by product, and it's determining that, look, your change is happening entirely by the Vertex AI provision throughput. And it also does another really important thing, which is it is comprehensive about all your cost changes. What that means is it didn't ignore any of the smaller cost changes just because it found a bigger cost change. That means that you can be sure that it didn't miss anything. So in conclusion here, it says, well, looks like your fluctuations are coming from provision throughput and Vertex starting April 18th and all the Gemini activity that has happened in this project. So This is great. Now let's actually make sure that this is true, right? So I'm going to go back to my project here. I'm going to change to 30 days. And I'm going to filter for provision throughput as the product. And there you go, right? It is very clear that Gemini got it right. And for the fluctuations question, it said that it was Vertex Gemini API. So I'm going to try that too. And here you have it, right? All the other spend from Cloud SQL and Cloud Run was pretty stable, but the ebbing and flowing was actually happening from the Vertex Gemini API. This took me all of, 3 minutes to figure out? Like right in front of you on a live demo. This is how fast it is, and it works, right? So I'm super excited about this. Let's actually switch gears into another feature where I actually got alerted about a cost anomaly in one of my other projects. So I'm going to switch over to that project. And in this project, yep, I see in the last 7 days that there has been indeed a huge increase in my spend. So I wonder what that is. And very helpfully, Gemini has already told me that there is a cost anomaly, which was also something that I was alerted about. That's why I got to see this page. And it says, oh, look, on the 18th, there was a 900% increase in your cost. Wonder why that is. So I'm going to click on View Research. And Gemini's going to take a second to think about it. And while it's doing that, we can actually see the power of this coming together, right? Already, it has done the analysis for us. And again, your morning workflows are super simple now because you come in, you see this, you say, yep, I understand what's happening. So here, it's telling me cost spike from $486 to $7,000. And that was primarily because of cloud storage data transfer fees. It also pinpoints the exact file or the resource that caused it. This is the large files storage bucket. And it clearly articulates what the root cause is in terms of the driver of the cost. So let's look at the research to make sure the story checks out. Here, in addition to all the steps that it took, it's identifying where the resource was and what it cost. So you look at the cost here, look at the detail. It gave you the total cost of the resource. And it afterwards very clearly broke out the cost of that resource and said, out of the $6,770, $6,736 are coming entirely from data replication fees. And the moment I realized this, I actually looked at it and I said, oh, it is somebody from my team who's doing this. In this case, I knew what was happening because I told them to do this for the demo. So it wasn't fully unexpected. But at the very least, we knew that this was going to work. And now we know exactly where this is coming from. So we'll switch back to our slides. All right, right on time. Wow, this is amazing. We have 2 minutes left, and that's all the content I have left. So when we started this presentation, we started with the mission of empowering our developers to make cost optimization easy, to help you shift left on that cost optimization journey. And with our full stack approach, developers now have that choice. They can use whichever surfaces they want to accelerate their workflows to optimize costs. We launched several things today, including 5 additional products for granular cost and cloud optimization, including BigQuery. We also launched an app optimized API for you to get your cost efficiency reports quickly and democratize that information to developers, and for you to be able to build agents out of it. And we also launched a Sidekick Gemini Cloud Assist agent that now helps you reason about your costs deeply and proactively notifies you about cost anomalies and the root causes. With these products, we hope that Google Cloud is the best place for you to be able to shift left on your cost optimization journey. Thank you all for taking the time this morning to join us. We really appreciate your time, and we'd love to get some feedback on the session. And thank you, Frank and Major League Baseball, for joining us on stage today.